add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
This is
Hiring on all cylinders.
Hello, recruiting world. Rob Stevenson here for another classic installment of Hiring on All Cylinders. At this very moment, my voice is bouncing off a satellite and rocketing through space and time to fill your ears with the sweet, sweet sounds of recruiting advice. I am particularly excited for today's episode, so much so that I have enlisted the help of Entelo's fearless leader, our CEO, Jon Bischke. Jon, how are we?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks as always, Rob, for having me on.
And joining Jon and I is an institution in our space. He's the founder of the hashtag True Conferences. He advises all manner of talent tech companies and plays a huge part over with our friends at Recruiting Daily. I'm sure I'm missing a few other accolades, but Bill Boorman is his name. Bill, so glad you're here.
Great to be here. Back in rainy San Francisco.
Exactly. This came about kind of at the end of HR Tech. There was a happy hour afterwards, ran into you. I may have had a glass or two of Chardonnay by that point, but it was wonderful to finally meet you after seeing you pop up all throughout the recruiter sphere. And the timing worked out. You were going to be here in our fine city, so I'm glad you're able to come in.
Good to be here.
And just a moment ago, the two of you were saying stuff that I wish we had recorded about the progression and the evolution of ATSs and all that. So with that, I kind of want to just get out of the way, Jon, and let you do your thing here.
Yeah, so Bill and I were chatting about what's happening in the space right now, and I think what I find very interesting is, Bill, you're an advisor to a whole number of companies that are doing really interesting and innovative things. So kind of a two-part question. One is I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of what you're seeing generally in the space around innovation right now, where you think some of this is going. And then the question that I asked almost everybody at HR Tech as I was talking with them is, what was the most interesting things that you saw there? So could be related, could be the same, or could be different, but let's start with
well, I think that's kind of interesting. If I compare this HR Tech with, say, the previous 2 or 3 years, I think that the real standout stuff for development was coming from names that we know, and rather than perhaps new startup stuff. A lot of the startup stuff seemed to be imitation rather than innovation, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, because sometimes you're copying things that were out when the market wasn't quite ready, and now perhaps it is. So I'm thinking about things like Olivia and some of those products. A lot of the text recruit, a lot of the text stuff is things that I was operating out of a database 10 years ago, or maybe a different scale.
Everything old is new again.
Yeah, everything old is it's a retro. We just call it hipster. Bang a beer on it and call it hipster. So I thought seeing a lot less innovation. And one of the things particularly I noticed about the HR Tech is not a lot of innovation out of the US, which is maybe where we've expected to see it before. And the big continent that really stood out, even just by volume of people and accents and what was going on, was Australia and New Zealand. I go to New Zealand once a year for inspiration. I think it's about 4 years ahead of everywhere else for lots of different reasons. And probably the best innovation technology I saw, apart from maybe what I saw with guys like IBM, the recruiter product, I think is going to be really interesting with what they're doing. That we're really seeing Watson and AI. They've spent over $1 billion on developing analytics, right? So they should be able to. We're actually beginning to see that in a real product when it's been promised before. So I left excited by some of the established names, actually, what they were doing, and less excited by there were maybe 2 or 3 new companies that stood out a little bit for what they were doing.
So where I think you were going to go there was to tell us about some amazing innovation coming out of New Zealand, but is that where you're going to go?
No, not necessarily, although I would say companies like Fuel 50 and Talent App Store, Talent App Store in particular, built something that I did a presentation about 3 years ago and said, would it be great if someone built something like this, where you separate the APIs from the product and you can drop products into workflow into the same, and you can integrate with any CRM, so it's CRM agnostic. So I was kind of, it was just exciting to see someone had actually gone away. I haven't actually seen the product yet, so it might be rubbish, but to see the concept there was really exciting.
And one of the things, I was interviewing someone at HR Tech, and he said something to the effect of, his biggest revelation walking the show floor was that he had been spelling HR wrong the entire time. It actually is spelled with AI, not HR.
AI,
and so I'm kind of curious, and you've done some presentations on AI in the past.
Yeah.
How excited are you about AI in recruiting? How much of this do you feel is real? And did the 20-some companies on the show floor that actually talk about AI, did they actually have any AI, or was this more marketing spin at this point?
No, I think probably of the 23 or 4 had what you'd consider to be AI. I think 9 or 10 had what they'd consider to be AI.
Sure.
Right? So I'm not saying they're necessarily going out and selling it a
eye of the
spurious way.
beholder.
They just haven't quite seen, they haven't spent enough time in somewhere like a Google lab or to see what's real.
It's real.
And I think in the AI space, we're going to see certain things. I think what we're actually talking about, we're seeing more of, and this is a great thing, is we're seeing the automation of recruiting admin. And recruiting and simplifying things into producing things like shortlists and doing a human level of selection over who's shortlist, how do we schedule people. So I think what we're seeing is when you look at workflow, and we've needed this for a long time, if you can automate most of the recruiting process, which I believe you can, we can actually start concentrating on the human things, like the relationship pieces. We can have relationships with much smaller number of targeted people. I think there's some major changes we're seeing at the moment, which will materialize into technology, which I think are the headlines for people to think about related into this topic. The first one is, I don't believe people have ever been more focused on careers than they are at this moment in time, but they're not focused in career with company.
Yeah.
So historically, we've kind of said, I'll go and work for this company, I'll work for them for 10, I'll maybe work with 3 companies in my career. I think what people are really focused on now is job, and how is this job going to enhance my career. So what we're seeing is, while talent teams are beginning to catch up and go down a relationship route, we've seen that through the rise of things like recruitment marketing and CRM from a tech point of view, to actually saying it's much more about job and job brand. Applicants are actually becoming transactional. And things that we might have considered important in the past, like say culture fit, I think is less and less important, because people that you viewing it, I'm going there for a short period of time. So I may not like the environment, but if it's going to enhance me and move me on, it's going to look good on my resume, it's going to create me a new opportunity. So I think we're going into a space where retention of employment is not really important. If anything, it's a negative thing in an organisation. If you keep your the same engineering team together for 10 years, we might have considered that a good thing. Actually, we'll be thinking we kind of siloed. We're just getting our ideas. Whereas actually, if we can have our engineers rotating every 18 months, new people coming in, new people going, them going away and getting new experience. What becomes important then is not retention of employment, but retention of relationship. So if you're going to work with me forever, what are the things we're going to have to do to keep you engaged with us, keep you looking at us, so that the 7 or 8 times we have a real opportunity where we want to bring your expertise back and you want to be here, we're connected so that you'll actually do that. So I think that kind of changes the whole dynamic of what we're trying to do, is this whole actually looking at very focused job branding. I'd say way ahead of employer branding. I think as a concept, the idea of employee value proposition is just ridiculous. That everyone comes to work for the same 4 or 5 reasons, and they all go, I love my job and it's great. It's actually the individual value proposition. What's in it for me? I also think from a recruitment marketing point of view, we need to be moving from a focus on content to a focus on conversations. How are we enabling conversations between people who are peers? How are we enabling them to find each other and provide a technology or a space where they can communicate in an honest way?
It seems like a lot of this gets into this notion of reducing friction, right? If you have an employee, if you have a workforce that's turning over more frequently, the friction levels have to come down, because if let's say people stay in their jobs on average 3 years instead of 30, well, now you as a company are replacing your entire workforce every 3 years instead of every 30. So I think that notion of what can you do to reduce/remove friction from the equation, and the relationships go a long ways to reducing friction. Because if I know you, we've worked together before, I can bring you on board. We don't have to go through a long, extended courtship process.
We don't have to go through a process.
So that's one thing. Do you believe that technology? I was on a panel at HR Tech talking about, after all the development and the new tech and the innovation, hiring is still extremely hard. Do you believe that hiring is actually getting easier because of the technology, or is that just a...
No, I think we're making it extremely hard.
Yeah. Why?
Right? I think we're making it extremely hard. I think what we've done is we've become... you might have to edit this comment out, but we've become... organisations have become magnificent shit magnets.
Sure.
Right? They've become fantastic. Through the whole excitement about recruitment is marketing and let's do this stuff. And while there's certainly marketing elements, recruitment is not marketing. Recruiting is recruiting. Let's not get carried away by that.
Is recruiting sales? Because we talk a lot about...
No, it's not. Recruiting's recruiting. It's a very unique set which requires tasks and tactics from other disciplines. So you need a bit of marketing in attraction. You need a bit of sales in the dealing with people, in the way that you deal with people. You need a bit of influence. You need a whole host of disciplines within that. Recruiting is recruiting.
Yeah.
It's a unique discipline. Some would say art. The tools bring the science.
Yeah.
The people bring the art. Is the way that I view it.
Yeah.
And the machines learn from the people, which...
And the people increasingly, people increasingly are doing what only people can do, and the technology does what.
Well,
people...
no, I don't necessarily think that's going to be true.
But is it the aim though? I mean, like, for example, like for me to get on the phone and sell a candidate, that will never be replaced by technology. I don't believe.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's certain key points in that, which is shifting the way that we are. Number one is, what is a conversation? What is a conversation in actual life? And our perception when we talk about getting on the phone and selling, a conversation is me talking to you, ringing you, saying, "Hi, John, let me tell you about this guy," or "Let me tell you what's going on." I think we're going to see less and less of that, and we're going to see less and less of cold contact and communication. That's really why we're seeing the the recruitment marketing piece and people connecting with companies. I think we're going to see a lot more communication is going on through messenger apps. So, for instance, I haven't had a phone number for 6 months. I've had to get one just to download some of the innovative apps, because you have to have a text message to get Uber, believe it or not, and that kind of stuff.
Funny.
I'm really viewing like Facebook is my call line. That's my phone book, and that's my call line. That's where everyone contacts me. But Messenger, I think some of the stuff Google's doing with Google Messenger, you're going to see a big Microsoft. We talked earlier about everything comes back. It's just sometimes it's in the right place.
Yeah.
I think we're in a world when we talk about AI and assistants and bots, where Clippy's come back with purpose. If you remember Clippy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Someone who follows you around the internet and says, "Can I help you with some stuff?" Except in those days it never could, because it was one-dimensional. It could just tell you things you knew, not things you didn't know. The area I'm really excited about now is, when we look at AI and bots, is the search bots combination. So one of the things I saw recently in South Africa was I went into the Google lab, and they showed me how Google constructs a search string for voice. So, and this was just somebody saying, he spoke into his phone and said, "I want to get a bottle of wine that goes with lasagna to take to my sister's house." A cheap bottle of wine, and the first query it does is contextually what's cheap. So it goes in your bank account and says, "What do you pay for wine?" And then it goes into your address book, your sister, to see where your sister lives, and takes your location from your phone, figures out according to the speed of movement, are you driving there or are you walking there? Goes into a review site and looks at what goes with lasagna, goes into your history and your sister's history to see if you've liked any stuff, like maybe liked some wine on Facebook or done something or commented about something, goes into a store on the route, looks at what they've got in stock, pings you back and says, "Do you want us to order it or do you want it delivered?" It'll be there at 8 o'clock. Where's the closest venue? So that's kind of on a simple scale. So what we're seeing there is search bots. So a voice in terms of the request, but turning that into a search from multiple places. And I think that's what we're going to see increasingly, is what people want is one point of search. Which will go into lots of technology. So it might go into the Entelo, it might go into the ATS, it might go, but actually, I don't want to go into Entelo. I don't want to go into other stuff. I want the answers delivered back to my Messenger, whatever that might
Yeah.
be.
And one of the things that's predicated on is having access to a lot of data, right? Google knows more about us than arguably anybody. I mean, Facebook is competing for that. Microsoft is competing for that.
It knows more about us than the government. So make no mistake about that.
Totally, right? So this is where what's interesting in the recruiting space is that even the biggest recruiting platforms, I would argue, have only a small fraction of the data that a Google or a Facebook would have.
Yeah.
So and let alone the startups, which are working off of a much smaller data set.
Yeah.
So how do we in recruiting tech compete with that? Or does IBM or Google or Facebook build the next generation of recruiting software?
Well, I actually think it's going to be a combination, right? So what you're seeing with things like Facebook Messenger is a good example. They're making it very easy for developers to build on platform.
Sure.
Very easy. It's standard now that if you were developing a platform, Slack is a great example, right?
Yeah.
From this thing, look at how Slack's grown. Very easy for you to go and develop. And if you want to deliver Entelo in Slack because people want to be in Slack, they make it very easy for you to do that. That's why I was really excited about the concept of the Talent App Store. Now, whether these guys pull it off or not, I don't want to endorse them and say, it's a great product. But as a concept, I think it's really interesting that you can enable. I get a lot of my inspiration from really weird places, right? Not surprisingly,
the best of us do.
Yeah. So for the last 18 months, I've been thinking a lot about what are the real communities, what are the dynamics of those, and how would you apply them in an organisational environment? And the two that I came up with that I was most interested in was Anonymous, was one of them, and what they do, and Minecraft, right? And the Minecraft communities, because Minecraft have a game in which players pay to create their own game, right? Which is kind of like, how do you get people to spend money on themselves? And you don't have to do anything apart from host it. And what I found, and fortunately I've got 15 and 17-year-old kids, so they can help me with digital communities without seeming weird. So I was able to look into it and say, right, okay, how does this work? And talk to lots of kids about what do you belong to. And there was 3 dynamics of the communities, which I think increasingly is becoming important. The first one is everyone felt like they belonged to a server. And that's exactly the same if you go to Anonymous. They'll say, I belong to Fortran, or I belong to
It's like Burning Man, you belong to a camp. It's kind of a similar,
right?
right?
It's that human need to say, these are my people in here. These are my people in here. So that was the first thing, is saying, if you can own the server, you can access the data. Because everything that goes on in that server is interesting. So now we then start thinking, okay, what are the other 2 dynamics? The second one is there's always a team of administrators, bit of technical ability. They can plumb stuff together. They can make things work a bit better. They make sure the server doesn't fall over. They do all the right stuff. And then the bottom end is it's having moderators from the community. So the community makes its own rules, and not only are they making their own rules, but they also police it. Rule of 3.
Sure.
1, you've been a bit. You might want 1, education. You might want to think about it. 2 is we've told you don't do that. 3rd one is we're suspending you maybe for a bit or maybe forever. Right. Yeah. So when you start thinking about how can we build technology on top of that as a stack, if we were an organisation and we wanted to do all the things that we want to do, from hiring, branding, referrals, employee engagement, payroll, all the things that we need to do. So the 3 stacks that I see technology breaking up into is pre-apply, which is all your CRM stuff, referral software, guys like RollPoint, marketing software, recruitment marketing software, career sites, landing pages, like the Clinch guys and so on. Doing, I think everything has a dynamic profile, so very much like Entelo, in the heart of everything now is not a resume. And the way in which we I think everyone's been so busy talking about the resume dying that I think it actually has in technology terms. It hasn't in terms of a way of applying, but if you look at any of the CRMs, they all have a dynamic people profile, and they all have a degree of refresh. They all have a degree of information comes from other sources, and we aggregate it and make it useful. We start dividing it into the other thing. I think is we talk about messaging rather than email. So where some technology actually looks like MailChimp for recruiting, I think others look quite different in that we're thinking about Facebook Messenger, we're thinking about Skype, we're thinking about Slack, we're thinking about all the places and that the question I didn't answer earlier, that's actually what I think a conversation is.
Yeah.
A two-way live exchange between two people. And that's more likely to be digital than voice.
Sure.
With the option to go to digital and then to video if you want to, and to book something in, right?
And then you do one day have a bot that you interact with or interacts with recruiters on your behalf or whatever it might be.
Well, we're seeing that. You know,
text opens up that possibility in a way that...
The Esther bot stuff, and I'm seeing, you know, if you look at Wade and Wendy or any of those kind of products now, I'm not endorsing any of those as saying they're great, but I know where they're going. I thought Great People had a really good platform with some good bots on that, and some good integration of stuff. And conceivably what's going to happen is bots are going to talk to bots about the admin.
Sure.
Which is where I think...
And they'll figure it all out.
Yeah,
right? Let's
go and have a look at the diary. Let's look where there's a space. Is that okay with you? Yeah, it's okay with them. They can do that. No, I can't. No, you can't do that. So let's move that around and let's look at... I need to get this information about them. Right, okay, I'll go and interrogate their... And I think this is coming down to, in a way, the ability to interrogate data pools from a specific perspective. Yeah. So your recruiter bot, your candidate bot will say, this is my data and I search it the best way and I know where stuff is filed away. And your recruiter bot is saying, this is the information we want. Now, what do you want to know? So, well, I want to know about the pension scheme, or I want to know about the skills involved in that. So, and what that's going to create ultimately is bots talking to bots and people concentrating on I've got an appointment at 2, I need to go and do that. Now, what I believe, what I'm driving towards is that will create more time for those people to have a relationship, to talk, to do things, to offer better things like candidate experience and stuff like that.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Just to automate it all. And I think that the average number of steps I've seen in a hiring process for organisations I've looked at is 56. It's the average number. 56 tasks have to happen in some kind of order. And that can be anything from somebody booking a conference room to sending an email to arranging a phone screen. And for the most part, that's all done by people right now. And it doesn't need to be on either side.
I would agree.
And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think anything that gets more human interaction, more intimacy, if you will, in the hiring process, I think that is going to be a good thing on both sides. So we're almost out of time. I want to ask you one more question. It's one of my favorite interview questions. I don't ask it nearly enough. The interview question is what do you believe in that most people disagree with? But I'll ask you specifically about recruiting. So what do you believe is true about recruiting or the future of recruiting that most people would disagree with you on?
I think EVP is a myth, employee value proposition, and I think employer brand is really employer bland. So that kind of bucks against popular.
And you would replace it with job brand or job value proposition?
IVP, individual value proposition. What's the proposition between you and me about why you should work here? I think actually, for most people, getting a job is like voting. We're not looking for the company that is most attractive or most sexy. We're looking for the company that's least shit, right? So I think people are looking at stuff and saying, I think
not that that's a comment on the November 8th elections here in the U.S.
Yeah, read into that as much or as little as you want.
That's exactly right. So I think it's people are looking for they're looking to see what's going on, and I think we've spent too long with people trying to be brands and trying to create stuff, and that whole idea of actually employee engagement. I think employee engagement as an area it's a category of software. It's not a category of practice. Yeah. So it's been a convenient bucket to stick stuff in, but it's very confusing. So I think that's going to happen, and the lifelong candidate in the and everything you hear Gen Y is a myth. I spend a lot of time in universities and stuff talking to students and basically saying, what do you want from a job? Do you want to save the planet and hug trees and all that kind of stuff, which is what old people tell me young people want. And they actually say, no, I want a job. Yeah. I go, why is that? They go, well, because I have $200,000 of debt and I want to pay that. So for the next 5 years, I'm focused on clearing my debt, and then I'll start thinking about it. What I do think is everybody aged over 40, not everyone, because you can't generalise in that way, but most candidates over 40 behave in the way we talk about Gen Y. Because they're actually saying, I've got some tradable skills, I've got some experience. Yeah. I probably am where I am in my career, so I'm not going to move up and down too much. So I actually do want to go somewhere where I worry about whether they're poisoning the planet or...
I paid my debt off. I know I can make enough money to
I'm okay.
feed
My house is
family.
paid for. I've got my family around me.
Now let's do something to impact the world.
Impact the world, or that I feel good about. So I think most of what we talk about in recruiting is bubble and hype, really.
Yeah.
So if you ask that question, you probably need another hour and a half for me to answer it, really.
I wish we had it. Bill, hopefully you come on the show again. Thank you for the time today. This was
always a pleasure.
This was fantastic.
And good work with the product.
I appreciate that.
Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
And thank you all of you out there in podcast land. He is Bill Boorman. I've been Rob Stevenson. Jon Bischke, always a pleasure to have you on as well. To all of you out there, thank you so much once more. Have a spectacular week and happy hunting.